To my understanding, and obviously being a part of the Call of Duty community for, since really Modern Warfare 2 back in 2009, we've seen certain transitions happen within the Call of Duty space where we had boots on the ground titles for so long. And I mean, that's really what Call of Duty was built on, right? Call of Duty was built on, this gritty warfare style shooter that, really redefined first person shooters as we know them in terms of just how they were able to build a massive ecosystem around Call of Duty. And, with Call of Duty Ghosts, I just feel what ended up happening here was we got all these titles, guys, that kind of came post Black Ops 2. And it felt like year over year over year that they would bring a new Call of Duty out. A lot of people would try the new game. And I remember myself included. We would try the new game and then we would always go back to Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 1, COD 4. We would go back to those titles because there was something about them that was really special. And, Call of Duty Ghosts was kind of put into a really tough position because so many people at that point wanted change. And we got change, guys. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, when you look at what happened after Call of Duty Ghosts was the jetpack era, which I think kind of led us into almost like the dark ages of COD. You could argue that the jetpack era was a good era of Call of Duty just because it changed the formula up. And by the end of it, people wanted to go back to boots on the ground. I think that Call of Duty Ghosts was the victim of, what the community wanted, that being change. And it just so happened to be Call of Duty Ghosts was kind of the game that tipped that scale. And maybe, just maybe, Activision had already greenlit those jetpack titles well before Ghost came out. But nonetheless, Ghost was kind of put into this position where, the community just begged for change once Ghost came out. And we're going to break down this game, guys, this title, as a whole. But I think when people ask me the question, like, what happened here and why haven't we gotten a sequel? Well, part of it was people wanted change. Number two, the game released on, the 360 as well as the Xbox One, and it kind of almost split the community up. And like I said, it felt like Call of Duty Ghosts was the subject of a title that got bad publicity in a number of different instances, really primarily the community backlash. And it, splitting up the community between the 360 and the Xbox One. I played Call of Duty Ghosts on the Xbox One. The Xbox One had just come out. I actually got my Xbox One from my mother-in-law. She waited in line to get her Xbox One, or to get my Xbox One as a birthday present. And, that's all she wrote. It was really cool. It was awesome to get the Xbox One, and man, was it a drastic change from the 360. The 360 guys, I think, will always be, at least, we can't say forever, but at least at this point in time, to what we have currently with the hardware that's available, the 360 was the best console of all time, in my personal opinion. I just thought it was, very easy to understand, was really great multiplayer experiences, like, creating parties. And I just, the whole experience of the 360, that era was really special. And the Xbox One was kind of that first plunge for Microsoft into making the Xbox more of like a PC, more like a computer. You could just see it from the interface and everything. And it was a lot more confusing on, at least at first. how to do a number of different things or different features on the Xbox One. Nonetheless, though, I think it split the community up. Call of Duty Ghosts wasn't received great. I mean, people enjoyed it, but it wasn't like the greatest Call of Duty of all time by any stretch. Now, there are things that I think at this point, because I was pretty critical of Call of Duty Ghosts when it came out. However, I think a lot of the backlash had to do with the multiplayer, not so much the campaign or Extinction Mode. And so we're going to talk about that as well, you know, because I think it's really important to put that into context. The multiplayer, obviously being the biggest part of Call of Duty as a franchise, I think that Call of Duty Ghosts suffered the most because of the multiplayer experience within the game. And it being the biggest part of Call of Duty, that's going to get, you know, a huge emphasis of the people who didn't like the title really looked at the multiplayer. And so that's what I think ultimately happened to Call of Duty Ghosts. It was the subject of a number of, you know, just issues from, you know, not only the publisher, the developer. It was, you know, it was released at a time where we were in between console generations. And so I look back on it and I say, you know what? Call of Duty Ghosts really wasn't that bad. Multiplayer certainly could have been better, but it was something that they could have built upon in a sequel to Call of Duty Ghosts. And Call of Duty Ghosts was the best-selling game that year, which Call of Duty is pretty much year over year the best-selling title on the planet. It just has this ravenous fan base. As many of you who are watching this know, Call of Duty has such almost like a cult following of people. No matter what comes out from COD, people are going to play it, myself included. I'm going to play the new Call of Duty when it comes out. Call of Duty is one of my favorite games of all time, you know, and franchises ever. I believe it's like, you know, one of the best. And the fact that they are able to churn out these games year over year and make a number of like different changes. It's not like a copy and paste like it is for like Madden or NBA 2K or like any of those sports games. It's not just a copy and paste. Call of Duty has really just, I mean, when we think of like how they've gone from, especially like two different extremes, like you go from boots on the ground to jetpacks back to boots on the ground, and who knows what the future holds. But it's really fascinating to me just how much backlash Call of Duty gets in terms of, you know, a lot of people saying that it is a copy and paste when it really isn't. I mean, each game is pretty different from the last or the previous. And so I got to give huge kudos and props to Activision and the folks over there, as well as within these studios like Infinity Ward, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, Raven Software. They really do crush it. And I mean, the fact that they're able to do it year over year is unreal.